Ever wanted to learn Apex Maps but found the topic boring? This video shows you how to build a game with Apex Maps and lists plus flows. Welcome to 100 Days of Trailhead, where the tech community comes to learn Salesforce, learn tech, get inspired, and invest in ourselves. We are your trail guides, here to support you on your learning journey. We release videos weekly. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a video. In the description below, you can find links for everything we mention in this video, as well as books and resources we found useful. Visit our blog, 100daysoftrailhead.com, for other helpful Salesforce and tech content. Learn how to build a rock, paper, scissors game with Apex Maps plus Flow. Lynda Kane walks through her iterative building process of this game, including a test class. Lynda is a 12-year admin developer. She co-leads the Cleveland, Ohio Developers Group and organizes the Cleveland Salesforce Saturday. When she is not Salesforcing, you can find her facilitating a Girls Who Code club, learning Python with PyLadies, geocaching, crafting, roller skating, swimming, or just enjoying life with her husband and her daughter.
Thanks everybody for coming. I'm glad you were able to join us for WIT Devs tonight. Glad that you're going to ask questions. Feel free to ask questions at any point. I don't promise to always have answers, but I'll at least think about it and try to get back to you. Or maybe someone else can answer for me, even better. Thanks for listening and rewalking this journey with me. And just thank you for being a member of this community of lifelong learning developers that really seem to care about our community as a whole and each other. It's a great place to be. So in our local community, our admin group started this thing where we always introduce ourselves with 5 things about us. So these are my 5 things. The first thing, I like to do crafts. So one of my big things is I'm very creative, whether it's any type of arts, music, crafts, drawing. The only thing I don't do is knit and crochet. Haven't learned how to do those yet. Maybe when I'm older. So the next picture on here, an early adopter of technology. That's actually a picture of a leading edge machine. That was the first computer my dad brought home when I was 8 years old, which he proceeded to put his disks in for Lotus 123, and they failed to work. However, over the next 6 months, I played around with the code and eventually it started working for him. Not really sure or even remember what I did, but somehow we got it working. So I like tech, I like following logic. The next thing going around the outer, I have a master's of arts in psychoacoustics. So the psychology of hearing. I went to the University of Minnesota for my grad work. Actually a PhD program, but the job outlook in that area was not very good at the time. So, and after a year in, you don't want to give up without getting something out of it. So I finished my second year, did a whole master's thesis and defense and walked away with my master's degree, and then proceeded to fall back on my secondary plan, which is to go into tech. I've been a Girl Scout for 21 years. So I started Scouts as, a cute little brownie in first grade with my little beanie and my brown uniform with the orange turtleneck shirt. Stayed with Scouts through my senior year of high school and a little bit into college with a campus Scout group, then dropped it for a while. Eventually, after grad school, moved back to Ohio, helped a friend with her troop for a number of years, then that drifted off, and now my daughter's a Scout and I help with her troop as their official camping volunteer. So if that troop wants to go camping, no matter what the weather, including snow, I'm with them. One of the other things I really like about rejoining Scouts is their latest program incarnation. So the GIRL acronym, Go Getter, Innovator, Risk Taker, and Leader, have definitely been those throughout my career at different stages. And the last thing about me is I'm Jewish. That's actually a picture of the necklace I inherited from my grandmother. She had it made when she found out I was to be born. And made sure I got it when I was 18. So I usually don't leave the house without wearing it. All these together, the biggest takeaways are that I view myself as being creative, very logical. I'm very persistent. I don't usually give up on things very easily. And learning is probably my biggest value in life. So all that said, even though I'm constantly learning, I still have knowledge gaps. We all do. So a knowledge gap is a discrepancy between what we know and what we should know, but for some reason we don't. So a couple knowledge gaps. I have a couple examples of knowledge gaps that I have. The first, my friends refer to me as the human GPS. They can call me at any time and say, Lynda, how do you get to wherever I'm at this place? And I can usually tell them. It doesn't matter if they're in Ohio or if they're in Illinois or if they're in Indiana, even though Indiana I haven't really lived at, or even Minnesota where I used to live. I can remember most of where I've been. However, despite the fact that Parmesan Mall is only like 6.4 miles away from my house, I just can't figure out how to get there. When I was in college, I took the bus there, a couple times a week sometimes to get away from campus, chill. I was a little bit of a mall rat in high school, so it kind of carried on a little bit into college, but I cannot figure out my directions for getting there. So I have a little gap in my vast map of streets just around that area. It's kind of odd, but it's there. My second example is about imaginary numbers. So when I first took calculus, I was taught I equals the square root of -1, you square it, you get rid of it. So you just have -1. That's all we were taught. And then I got to grad school. And on my first day of grad school classes, I had to take an undergraduate electrical engineering course. So here I am, a grad student, having to be in an undergrad class, the only female in the class. And I'm a little nervous about it. And the teacher gives this lecture about, he goes right into discrete math, talking about transforms. It's a little bit over my head, but I'm like, okay, I'll figure this out. And I figure I'll read the book, and he gives us our first assignment. And our first assignment was all the problems on page 11, and it was due next week. And I'm like, okay, cool. Look at page 11, 24 problems, great. 6 a day, I'll have this no problem, or 4 a day over 6 days. At night, I look at the homework, and it has one instruction. Put these numbers in polar form, and every single number is an imaginary number. And I'm looking at going, I don't know what to do with this. I know to square it and get rid of it, but I don't even know what polar form is. And I think, all right, I'll look at the first 10 pages and hopefully it tells me how to do this. And no, not at all. It's an engineering textbook. They don't tell you how to do math. So not really feeling very good about it. Here I am. I'm a grad student in an undergrad class, and I don't even know how to do the first homework assignment. So as you can imagine, having a knowledge gap and really feeling like an imposter when you're in a class where you should know what you're doing because you're a grad student with undergrad doesn't leave very good feelings at all. These little emojis kind of pretty much sum up how I was feeling at grad school at that point. I did get through that assignment. I tried to find a math book that would help me, didn't have much luck. I eventually called my baby brother, who was taking calculus at Urbana-Champaign, and he drove up for the weekend to help me learn how to do polar form, which is very sweet of him. Probably one of the last times he was really sweet, but that's okay. But let's get away from grad school. Let's talk about current stuff. So Apex. So I work mostly as an administrator, but I am a solo admin. So once in a while I have to do development. And I do have both PD1 and PD2, but I don't know everything. In fact, there are plenty of times when I still feel like a beginner. And I have a confession. I often have to review code, often code I haven't written. But when I get to that part where someone wrote something with math, I kind of try to gloss over it or ignore it or hope that the rest of the code will tell me what it really means. So I decided I really needed to rectify this. I've used map because I had to for my PD2 super badges to get through them, but I didn't really understand it. So take a moment and assess what I know. So I know it's a key value pair. So to me, key says, all right, it's got to be unique. So those are going to be unique, distinct values. I see it used a lot with triggers. And the most common way I see it is where I've got an ID with a query result of some kind, or some value with a query result related to it. And what did I really want to know? I want to know how do I really create them? Can I create them in a way that's not just ID and a select query? Because there's got to be more to it. And how do I get the data out of it? So once I've got it, how do I get that data? And should I actually use one successfully that's not in a Trailhead badge? So I decided to put together a journey, and I kind of thought about how I would go about this. And I came up with this idea that somehow I would write rock, paper, scissors in Salesforce. And I would use a screen flow so the user could actually play this game and include Apex actions. And that Apex would pick the computer's random weapon choice. It would determine who won. It would tell me what action the weapon took to actually win. Because it's no fun to just say that, in rock, paper, scissors, that rock beat paper. It's more fun to say that the rock covered the paper, or the rock beat scissors, the rock smashed the scissors, or the paper covered the rock. I want that action verb. And because I hate it when I see examples out there, or when I'm looking for how to do something and they show me all this great Apex code and there's no test class to go with it, I'm going to figure out how to write the test class too, because it should be complete. So I start on my path, and I start by going to my favorite developer resource, the developer ForceCom pages, and I look up Apex map. And I learned some interesting things. Both the keys and the values can be any data type. Any data type. So not just like your string and your numbers and your records, but it can be collection. I could use user defined record, data types. I could use built-ins, anything. It's pretty powerful. And the other thing I noted was that if the key is a string, it's case sensitive. So rock with a lowercase r and rock with an uppercase r are not the same thing. I'm going to have to keep that in mind when I'm writing my program. So the constructor for a map is fairly simple. It's map, and you do have to declare both types of data that you're using. And then there were a bunch of methods, and these are not all of them. These are just ones that I thought might be key to my program. The ones that I have in bold are ones that I was pretty sure I was going to use. You'll learn later how many of them I actually did. But important ones to put, how do I actually get those pairs in there? How do I get, that was one of my key things. How do I get that value out? How do I get the data? Interesting, there's one called key set. So I could actually get a set of all the keys. And I'm remembering set because it's unique, it's unordered, important to remember that. But then there was also this method called values, where I could get a list of all the values. And I'm like, that's interesting, but how am I supposed to know what the order is? But that's another story. The size, just like with a list, I can get the size of my map. I can check if it's empty. I can check to see if it contains the key I'm looking for. Was that even part of it? And of course, I can empty it too, so I can clear it. So all good things to know. Gives me a piece of learning. And then rock, paper, scissors. So kind of laying out how I'm going to think about this data. So I've got my weapon, I've got what it wins over, so what it can beat, and how it wins. And so my key is the weapon, so that's a string. And my values are both what it wins over and how it wins. So that's a list of strings. So my map is going to be a string list of strings that I'm working with. So remembering that I wanted to put this in a flow, and I actually started laying out an idea of that I would run an Apex call, get the computer's random choice, and present on the screen that, hey, I've chosen my weapon, choose your weapon. And the player could choose their weapon, and then I would do the compare, and are they the same or not? And then I would say, if they're not the same, well, let's find out what can beat what with another call. And then let's get the verb for the winner, and then we'll present the winnings. And then I read this, only one method per class can be invocable. And I'm like, oh, so if I want to do those 3 different things with Apex, I'd have to write 3 different classes. no, I only want to do one class, so I'm going to have to find a way to make this work. And then the other thing that threw me for a little bit of a loop for a moment was that the parameters I pass have to be a list and the return value has to be a list. And part of me should have known this because, about a month or two before I started on this, I had written and held a fun little class where we used Flow to serve up random knock-knock jokes. And of course, the return value there had to be a list. And even though it was only returning one knock-knock joke, I knew that I could have a list with just one element in it. But the parameter one kind of bothered me for a moment until I realized, oh, I'm just going to give it the name of the player's choice, and that's a list of one. So I'm okay. We can make this work somehow. I'm just going to have to figure it out. So at that point, I was ready to start coding. So I'm actually going to cancel all of this, and I'm going to hop into VS Code. So I started with, let's get that computer's random choice. And let's make this easy. Let's just create a map where I've got the first choice, the second choice, and the third choice. So an integer and the value. So I know I declare my map. I'm going to declare it as an integer string. I'm calling it weapons because that's what they are in this case. And I put my values using that put method that I learned about. When I would run it, I'd have system debug to make sure everything was there. And found something online that showed me how I could make a random choice out of a list, modified it a little to make sure that I actually got a value of 1, 2, 3 ultimately, and then had my choice, and that was what I returned. However, I kind of decided that this felt like overkill in terms of the amount of code, especially since I've written choose something randomly from a list before. So while this was a great learning exercise, not really what I wanted to use in the long run. So I kind of started over. So my second controller, I choose that weapon basically from a list of the choices. Much fewer lines of code, trying to follow best practices when I can. Not always succeeding, but trying. So after that, I said, all right, I need to make all my weapons so that I can get everything. So that was the next part of this class. And you'll see it's all commented out right now, but this is where I started. I started with, I was going to declare my map, and I'd already said it was going to be a map of a string with a list of strings. So I've got that declaration. And then I was like, now how do I populate that? And I was having trouble trying to figure out how in a put command I could put a string and then a list. So I'm like, all right, I know how to declare my 3 little lists for each of the different roles, and then I'll just put them in with my string. And that does work. But again, efficiency, that was 7 lines of code. I should be able to do it in fewer. So I did some more searching and I found an example, and I was like, yes, this is what I needed. So I can declare my map and I can assign the values all at once in one statement. It takes up a few lines, but it's a little cleaner. And part of me was kind of like, I should have done this. My favorite way to write my notes in college, when I was like saying, hey, this is my like little key to remember this definition or this concept, was always to write in equals, make it look like a little arrow. So I should have done that, but I didn't, and I had to find it. And I already knew how to declare a list within something. So yeah, that makes sense. So I was ready to go on. So I had my weapons. I could return all my game pieces, and I'm ready to go on. So the next thing I want to know is, all right, so I'm going to create a method where I give it the weapon in my hand, and I want to know who am I going to be? So that's my next method that I wrote, and fairly simple. I go get my game pieces. So I get my weapons, and I basically tell that use the get command. And I know for my list, I want the first value. So the 0 position element. return back to me, and that's what I'm returning. So, and what you don't have in here is all the testing I did in anonymous Apex to make sure it worked, and double checking because I never trusted it the first time. And then the second part after that, so after I've got my game piece, was to get the how, what was the action taken? And again, same basic call, just I'm choosing the second element in my list instead of the first one. Great, so I've got all the parts to my game. I can choose a weapon for the computer. I can get who's gonna beat. I can get how they're gonna beat. Now I just have to figure out how the game actually gets played in code so that I can have that invocable method that I can use in my flow. So that's the last method. And I actually added the invocable at the end, but we're just gonna have it, it's there. So I'm gonna play my game and I'm gonna give the game the player's choice because that's the variable piece that I don't have any say over whatsoever. So I know my result's gonna be a list, so I declare that. I say, all right, the computer's got to make its choice. So I use that method in this class to have the computer choose its choice. And then the first thing I know, it's rock, paper, scissors. The easiest way to know what's happening is to look at what did the player choose? What did the computer choose? Are they the same? Great, game's over. So that's my first if statement. I check, what did the player choose? What did the computer choose? They're the same. Great, it's a tie game. And I'm going to give nice sentences in my result because I don't want to just say tie game. I'm going to say, hey, we both chose this. I didn't want to be snarky, so these are all nice, very factual statements. And then I'm going to check after that. So if that's not the case, then I need to see, did the player win? Because, we'll evaluate the player first because we're nice. So I call that, who does it beat? So I say, all right, the player, here's your weapon. Who can you beat? If that's what the computer chose, you won. So if I and the player and I chose rock and I run that who beats, it's going to come back with scissors. If the computer chose scissors, you won, I won as the player. Great, that's what I'm going to tell. So I'm going to then say you win because your choice. And then I'm going to add in how they beat. So I call that beats how, adding the player's choice. And then I actually end in my text switch, unfortunately, with all the extra little bars on here from Zoom. I cannot see that bottom scroll bar. Let's see if this will help. No, it's not. All right, so, but it is there afterwards for the computer choice. But I can't. And then the last thing, of course, is if the player doesn't win, then the computer won. And so the computer's just going to say, I win because my choice, and with the action verb beats, and after that is your choice string together. Sorry, it's not showing out. I could zoom back out, but it's much easier to be there. So we've got all of our code, our games in there. And I ran several tests in Apex, checking that things worked.
Lynda, we had somebody that said you can use the right scroll and it should be able to scroll over.
I should be able to, but it's not letting me.
It's not letting
like the right arrow.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it's just concatenated together with the computer choice. So they said just forming sentences, pulling everything in. So ran some tests in anonymous Apex, making sure it worked the way I'm expecting. And then I said, all right, now I got to write my test class because I have to make sure I get my coverage. So on to test class. And I actually wrote one test class per method, not counting the make the weapons method, because I'm going to call that in other things. So I test my anonymous, my random choice, just making sure I get back one of the weapons that's part of that original set. That one, easy, works well. I test my who beats by giving that method each of the different selections, making sure I get back what I expect. Same with the verb. Those ones pretty straightforward, easy enough to have multiple asserts, because if I'm sending rock, I'm expecting scissors and smashes. If I'm sending scissors, I know I can cut the paper, and if I have paper, I cover the rock. Then I test the game. This one, I decided I needed to test each possible scenario where a player has a choice. So I'm testing each of the choices the player can make. And I'm basically just making sure I get back one response, and I'm not failing out and not getting a response. Now, remember, my game has a little random element, so I'm not coming up with a good way to test that random element. I'm sure there probably is one, a little bit beyond me at the moment. So it adds some interest, though, when you run your tests, because sometimes when I run my tests, I get 93% coverage because it tests one of those three options between tie, player wins, and computer wins. And sometimes I can get 96%, meaning two of them. And once in a while, when I run my tests, it actually manages all three scenarios. But, 93% is well over 75%. So I've met the requirement I have to meet, and I'm going with it. This is just for fun anyway. Eventually, at some point in the future, I will want to figure out how I can make it happen every time, but I'm going to let it go. So coming back to our presentation here. Just a quick recap of the code side. I have that random weapon select. I decided math there was overkill. Just use the list, be done with it. I make my weapons map. I choose what weapon can beat. I choose how the weapon wins. I bring it all together, and I've got my code coverage. So I covered my code side. My next side is my flow. And the flow is actually pretty easy. It's 3 steps. Really, it is. It's a screen where the user can select what they're going to pick. I call that Apex class to actually run the game and get the result. And then I share the result with the user. So I can show that. So we've got our flow. It's right here. So we've got our flow, the screen element, fairly simple. I just say, hey, let's play. I give it some color, make it a little bigger. And then I have a pick list for pick the weapon. And I give them their choices. So I'm presenting them with choices of rock, paper, or scissors, nothing outside the ordinary. That way I don't have to worry about needing to really test for things like, did the user choose spatula? Because that wasn't a choice I gave them. So pretty simple for that one. For the second, the Apex action, and something that I should have in here. When I first choose my action, and I'm looking for it, the thing to remember when you're looking for an Apex is you're looking for the name of the controller. So the actual name of the class, not the name of the method. Took me a little while to realize that. Kept trying to find my method and couldn't find it. Found it eventually. And then when I actually set that up, I can either include or not include depending on my class. In this case, I want to include what was the player's choice. So what's my parameter. And then I do manually assign out and store my output value into an output variable so that I'll be able to display it easily. There is some advanced setting in here where you can let the flow decide the controller. You can say always run new. And really with a game, I probably should always run new, but I have not looped it or anything in this. So it's kind of how I built it out. And then the last screen, I'm literally just showing the result. Since I already put it in a sentence, I don't have to worry about pulling little parts, and just, played a little bit with some formatting so it'll stand out a little. So assume you guys want to see it played. So I took my flow and I put it on my home screen. It's right there. So it's just there in nice bright purple letters. Let's play rock, paper, scissors, and we can make our choice. So we can choose rock, paper, or scissors, and we can hit next. And in this case, we had a tie game. And when I say finish, then it refreshes my page and I can play again. And I can sit here all day long if I want. And now the computer won. Let's see if get a repeat or not. We'll probably get a, no, I won. And we can just keep playing. And yeah, I'm not scrolling down this because I'm going to follow my own instructions. So we've got rock, paper, scissors. We've got our flow. Really quick recap of the flow. My first screen, my user selects the weapon from the pick list. I have that Apex action that runs the code. I have to pass in the user selection. I need to store the result. And on the second screen, I show the result. So great, RPS works. We're all good. But our learning doesn't end just because we got that game to work. So other things I need to think about, maybe, or things that I might add later. Error handling. What if the user had the chance to choose something like spatula or lizard? What would I need to do to check to make sure that they're choosing a valid response and I deal with it appropriately? And that's really where I could probably use that contains key method of map would be a great thing to use there. And I kind of wonder, as my second bullet, is there some way I could use that key set method instead of list to somehow pick my random weapon choice? I kind of wonder, it's not really ordered. It'd be a little difficult, but it might be possible. I can always add images to my flow, increase the visual appeal. Just purple text is not always super appealing to everybody. And I did leave myself some wiggle room there to improve code coverage with 93%, because that perfectionist in me really wants 100%, but is not quite there yet. And of course, I did not do a very good job of documenting my code. And I talk a lot about this, that I won't push other developers' code unless they give me a doc box somewhere in their code. But I didn't write one myself. Shame, add Lynda. And then of course, I can work on my skills with Lightning and work on a Lightning component or a Lightning web component for the UI instead at some point, and work on my JavaScript that also really needs help, especially if I'm ever going to earn that last super badge. But one last thing I thought about too was, what about rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock? Because, I can't be a tech nerd and not think about how to expand this game to the next level. So, how can I handle the fact that there's two possible weapons? And I thought about it, I said, great, a map string to a list string, kind of like we did already. But then what about the action that wins? So I really need to be able to send it both choices in a list and then get back that string result. So that is a different type of map. And obviously I'll also have to modify the flow. So I took a Saturday and I said, all right, we're going to do this. So then let's see, bring back here so we can pull the new controller. So we did. I said, I am going to write this new version. So obviously I expanded my choices for the computer. I gave it lizard and Spock. So now it's got to pick out of 5. And then for my B2, now I've got still a list with 2 things, but those 2 things are both choices of what can beat. Because in rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, the rock can beat both the lizard and the scissors. The paper can beat the rock and Spock. Scissors can beat the paper and the lizard, and so on. And then how do they win was the one that had to change the most, because I start out with a string and then I get the verb. So rock beats lizard by crushing it. Rock beats scissors by smashing, like we always did. Paper beats Spock by disproving. Lizard beats Spock by poisoning. All those fun little ways that just highlight the game a little more. And of course, then I have to make some changes to my actual game. I still have the tie condition. And when I'm checking if the player won, I have to really see, is the computer's choice contained in the list that I get from the player's choice? And then obviously when I do the beats how for sending over to figure out the method under which they won, I have to give a list of both choices that were made. But the end results from the homepage, this was the don't scroll down, is that I actually have rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. So now, instead of just having 3 choices, I can play the lizard, and in this case, tie, or I can play again, and I can play the lizard and win. And unlike the Big Bang Theory version, I do not always pick Spock and end up in a tie. So that concludes my learning journey. But just for you guys, I do have instructions out there that you can follow if you want to make it yourself. Actually, after I stop sharing, I will paste those in the chat so you can get to that. It's 2 docs. So the first doc, which is the one I'll give the link for, gives the instructions with all the code I used and instructions for the flow for rock, paper, scissors. And it has a link to the second doc, which actually spells out everything for rock, paper, scissors, scissors. So I will stop sharing, and we can see what questions or whatever is in the chat, since I can't see it at the moment.
Well, there is a comment. One comment says, in reference to the testing, that doing a test.isRunningTest method would work on the random number method. I mean, that was a suggestion, but
yeah, I was going to research, and I figured there's some way to set the seed, but because I know I've done that with other languages, but eventually I will figure out how to get 100% code coverage.
Absolutely. All right.
But yeah, is running this test is test running. I just try to avoid that, just because I hate running into that, because I see a lot of developers use it as a way to get out of really testing some things.
Thank you, Lynda. Thank you so much. This was a ton of fun. And with that, we're at the end. What will you build with Apex Maps? Are you going to rebuild this game? Comment below. We would also love to hear what video topics you want us to cover in future videos in the comments. If you stayed with us, we want to take this opportunity to say thank you. Since you stayed with us, here is a bonus. There are some great tools out there to learn Apex, including but not limited to Trailhead, 100daysoftrailhead.com, and Apex Academy on Pluralsight. Links to these resources are listed in the description. Thank you for spending time with us. Please like and subscribe to our channel because we share weekly content to support your tech and Salesforce learning journey. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss a new video. We also handpick these videos, which we recommend you watch next. Connect with us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and on 100daysoftrailhead.com, all of which are listed below. Thank you for learning with us, and we'll see you back tomorrow.